This tutorial is going to cover the basic everything of Photopea, and we'll start with something very simple, and we will add to this as we go. So the very first thing I want to go over is how to open an image in Photopea. So again, if we are using the internet and we search any image, doesn't matter what it is, it could be, poodles. All we need to do, and again, I'm currently on a Chromebook, is whatever image we want, we can take that image, two-finger click, and I'm going to save the image as. When I click Save Image As, you'll notice it pops down here, it downloads it, so I could look at it in the folder. But we're going to go back here. We're going to go File, Open. And again, we're brought to My Drive. Now, it should be in the downloads, but we're just going to go to Recent. The easiest way for us to find it is just to click on Recent and look for the most recent file as we just downloaded it. All right, there it is. So I'm going to open that file. Now, if we want to open another image inside of this image, again, all we're going to do is go back here. We're going to type in, how about surfboard? Okay. Again, here are all these surfboards. So if this is the one we want, we are going to two-finger click. We're again going to save the image as. Image is downloaded. We're going to go back to Photopea. Now this step is going to be a little different because we're going to insert the image into our existing file. So we're going to go File, and instead of Open, we're going to go to Open and Place. So we're opening it and placing it inside our existing file. So again, might take a second. We want to click on Recent. There it is. Now, before we can do anything with this file, we can make it larger and smaller. We can still do that. But if we want to actually manipulate it and cut the background out and put the poodle on the surfboard, what we would need to do is rasterize this layer. So whenever you bring a new image into an existing image, you need to rasterize the layer. And the way you're going to do this is two-finger click, and you'll see rasterize right there. So an easy way to notice if you have to rasterize the image is there's a small square right here where my mouse is. And again, because I placed it in there, it's not technically a Photoshop file if you want to think of it that way. It's more of like an object. So again, if we want to actually manipulate the file, we need to rasterize it. And now we will be able to, and again, if you don't rasterize it and you go to click the magic wand or something, it will actually come up and tell you on the screen, it'll say that you can't manipulate it because it's not rasterized. But once it is rasterized, then we can manipulate and do whatever we want with it. Control D is always deselect. Again, that's a very good thing that you should understand. So that is how we would put an image into another image that is already open. The other thing to remember is now we're just going to take a little tour. So we have our layers palette, we have our history, we have our navigator, and remember the navigator allows me to zoom in because really what I would want to do is make sure my image quality, I can get in close to get my crops and things. And if the navigator is not there or any of the history or the layers, any of that stuff's missing, you would just go up to Window and they're all here. So there's navigator right there. Now, something else is you'll notice that my surfboard and the poodle are very grainy. So something that we could have done that I didn't actually do is when we do our Google search, we can actually do this using the tools setting, and we can actually search large files, okay? Now you could also type in something like surfboard high res, But if we search a large file, it should solve that problem. Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to work, but it's a good habit to get into is using larger files so that we have a better image quality. Now, with that being said, in here we have the light. Let's go back to where we were. So we have the navigator, we have the history bar, so that's how we go back in time, whatever we want. We have the layers palette. So the layers palette is going to show us every layer. So if we want to make a new layer, we simply come down here and it looks like this blank piece of paper. And that is our layers palette. And remember, the eyeball allows us to see the layer. So if we turn the eye off, it disappears. So we can double click on layers and we can name them whatever we want. It makes it easier on you. And again, I'm saying that because right now it seems simple, but when you end up having 30 to 40 layers and you're working on stuff really detailed, you would definitely want different names. So again, I named that one blue. You can tell it's a checkered background, so it's clear. Okay, so it's not visible right now. We also have the waste can, trash can. So if you want to get rid of the blue layer, we drag it down here and let go of it right there and it'll drop off. Okay. Now, no, we don't want to do that. All right, we can link the layers. There's all sorts of options, folders, masks, stuff in there. But again, this is just going to be basics. All right, let's go back over here. So here at the top bar, we have everything that affects the image itself. It's not what we're using to manipulate it necessarily. It's more the whole image. So what we can do with that is we can, for one, under image, we can check the image size. It's going to give us our DPI. It's going to give it like our resolution. So right now we are at a 72 resolution. Remember, I want you to work in 300, and where it says pixels, we're going to change that to inches. And right now we have a 3-inch by 2-inch work. So if you were to complete that, and then I said, wow, that's amazing, I want to print it out. Well, it's like that big. So again, we need to make sure we are working on that. So we're going to set that to 8. And they are linked. So you'll notice this is a ratio like we use when we measure for drawing. We hold our pencil and our thumb out. And again, that's awful tiny. So let's make that one 8. And now we have an 8 by 12. Now, 8 by 12 is not really what I want you to work within. We should be working around an 8.5 by 11 or anything a little smaller than that, because if I print, I'm going to be using a regular printer. But for now, we'll just hit OK. And again, my Chromebook is a little laggy. You can see why I usually do my tutorials on my PC. So let's see if what is going on here. We're zoomed way in. Okay. So again, the navigator, when I work, I usually always have the navigator open. It's very easy to just open and close and move around the screen. So let's take a tour with the rest of these areas. So again, under image, we can do a lot of things like adjustments. We can do contrast. We can change the hue or saturation, the color. We can do a lot of these things. You can play around with that. You could also go in and get to transform from here, but I'll show you the better way to do that. We have our layers, which again, we have our layers palette. We would just use that. Filters, all those things. But really what you're probably more needing to know are the tools themselves. So these are the tools over here. So I'm going to go through them very quickly, and you can find out more about the tools if you need to online. It's very simple to find, and we've covered this stuff multiple times. So again, we have the move tool. Literally, it would be used to move whatever your item is. Oh, that's so slow. Oh, why are we on magic wand? Try that again. So it would move whatever we're on. Again, notice it only does whatever layer I'm on. So if I want to work on the poodle layer, if I wanted to move the poodle layer, I need to click on the poodle's layer. If I want to work on the surfboard, I need it on the surfboard. If I want on blue, I would need to be on blue. Okay. The Marquee Selection tool. So again, just lets us make a quick selection. Then I can 2-finger click on that box, bring up free transform. And there's lots of other stuff too. But free transform is what you're most commonly going to use to make things smaller, larger. You can also rotate them. So slow. We could also flip it. So again, our surfboard needs to be the other direction, or whatever we want. Okay. Now, keep in mind, we can also, once we're in free transform with the Marquee Selection or rectangle selection tool, we can two-finger click it a second time, and it actually gives us a whole bunch of options like warp, perspective, distort. We can rotate it, we can flip it, whatever. Okay. So again, if we wanted it that direction, we could do that. I'm going to hit enter. And we're going to move on as soon as the computer catches up. Okay. Let's hit Control D for deselect and then move on. This is the lasso tool. Now you can use the lasso tool. Remember, whenever all I'm doing to bring up those options are holding down the mouse. Now you can actually use the lasso tool if you want, but I hate the lasso tool. I always mess it up. I love the polygonal lasso tool. And some kids say, oh, but it makes it too blocky. It doesn't make it too blocky if you use the navigator. So again, if we wanted to get this surfboard by itself, what I would do is I'd zoom in. And again, when I zoom in, I really want to get almost like ridiculously, it's so choppy. I want to get ridiculously close because the closer you are, the better it's going to look. So then I would use my polygonal lasso tool and I would go right along the edge. And every time I click, it makes an anchor point. And again, I have a tutorial on this already, so we're not going to get too in depth. And again, when I double click or hit enter, it'll make a selection. And then if I want to get rid of that, I would just hit backspace. Once that's gone, I'm going to do Control D, and I would go to the next section of the surfboard and do my next selection and delete it. Now, the magic wand, again, some people think the magic wand is awesome. I am not one of those people. The magic wand does a really bad job of editing. Now, it'll work on really solid areas with high contrast, but that's not how life usually works. So you have a quick selection, you have the magic wand and object selection. Basically, what the magic wand is doing, you can set the tolerance on that, but it picks areas that it thinks are the same similar color that we have set up. And when I do that, you'll see that it has picked all the things that it thinks look gray. And if I hit backspace, it's going to delete those. Now, it seems like, wow, that worked really well. But again, most of the time, what the magic wand ends up doing is giving us a really poor edited job. And we have to zoom in and do it all by hand anyway. So what's the point of doing it in the first place? We might as well just do it by hand to begin with. All right, next, here we have the crop tool. Now, the crop tool is actually a really good tool, and not for necessarily cropping an image, but for giving us more workspace. So what I like to use the crop tool for is to make a canvas size real quick and simple. I can just drag it largely on the outside of the work, and if I hit enter, it actually gives me more workspace. And this is a really good tool to use because we can always go back and make it smaller later. But typically what happens is students need more space, something's going off the page, and it's a very simple way to just make the workspace larger. And again, when you're totally done, yes, it does work as a regular crop tool. So we select the area you want and make it smaller. The eyedropper tool is used to select colors. So instead of just guessing what color something is if you're trying to match it, you can simply use the eyedropper tool to click on an area of your work and it will select that area. So again, if I use the eyedropper tool on the dog there, it says it's a gray here, and you'll see the colors changing right here. So whenever I click on an area, what it's doing is it's taking a sample of that specific pixel, basically, that I'm clicking on. We're gonna skip the healing brush. We're gonna talk about, this is just a regular brush tool. So again, if I click the paintbrush, it will work just like a paintbrush that we are using in any other program. You can change the size and everything. So it's pretty basic. Here we have a stamp tool, clone tool. We're going to skip that. Next, we're going to go to the eraser. So the eraser is just like what you would think it is. It's an eraser. Again, it works similar to the brush tool where you would set your size. And here, let's pick the background, the poodle. And again, it erases. So there you go. Again, you can change the opacity of it. That's like the strength of the eraser. So if you don't want it to be a solid erase, if you're trying to blend something or fade it, you can do that. Next, below that, we have the gradient tool in the paint bucket. So the paint bucket is just like it would be on any other program where, you fill it in, it should make it blue. Might take a second. The gradient tool is similar to the paint bucket, but you draw a line, and where you draw the line is going to give you your gradient. It's going to give you a fade pretty much. And if you look up here, you can see we're doing a black to white, or sorry, blue to white, but there are a whole bunch of options. So if you wanted to go to like blue to clear so the background could be seen, you could do that. This is something you can play around with. Again, we can have the opacity. Opacity just means how solid it is, if we can see through it, that kind of stuff. Okay, moving on. And you can, over here, you can change the opacity of the layers again. So that's like if we wanted to be able to see through it. And I actually use the opacity as a lot. That's something that I heavily use when merging layers and making things look like they fit. Again, we have a blur tool, and there are options. So we have a blur tool, a sharpen tool, and a smudge tool. Again, very similar to a paintbrush where we would set the size, but the blur tool allows us to smudge things pretty much. Or I should say the smudge tool allows us to smudge things, like streak them. The blur tool just kind of makes things fuzzy. Here we have a burn and dodge. That is a term from back in the day when, well, even Mr. Hedges used to develop film. And burning and dodging is something that you allow more light or less light through a negative when you're actually developing the film. I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can make things darker and lighter. Here is the text tool. So again, the text tool is something we've used. So all you would do with the text tool is you would click and drag, and it's going to make a text box. And then you'll notice my size is up here is 24, my font is here, and my alignment is there. So again, the color I'm in is black, and we would type, and you can see it's really, really tiny. So a lot of times students will tell me, oh, Mr. Hedges, the text tool won't work. It is working. You just have your font so tiny that you cannot see it, okay? Now, once you have the text set and you're happy with it, if you want, well, we can move it on the wrong layer. You can move the text around, but we can't make it bigger until we rasterize the layer. Just like when we first opened the image of the surfboard, we had to rasterize it. The text layer is the same thing. So if you look here, you'll notice that the layer does not look like the other layers. If we want it to be a regular layer that we can free transform, we're going to 2-finger click and rasterize it. Once it's rasterized, you can do whatever you want. You could select it with the Marquee Selection tool. And basically, it's no longer text. It's more like an image. So we could take that, and if we wanted, we could stretch it out and do whatever we want to it. Again, Control-D, deselect. All right. We have the pen tool. We're not going to talk about that. This is a magnifying tool, so you can zoom in and zoom out. Again, you should be using Navigator. I've already covered that. Navigator is the way to go because I can zoom in and zoom out, but that's a waste of my time. Just click on the Navigator and get in the habit. Come on, computer, be cool. Okay, so you should get in the habit of zooming in and zooming out using the Navigator, because that is going to allow you to not only zoom in, but also you can see the red square and you can quickly move it to whatever it is you are working on. All right, and then here we just have our color palettes. So again, just like you would pick any color. All right. There are many other things that we can do in this program. There are many other things that I have not covered, but this should cover most of the basic things that you need that we've talked about up to this point. So again, if this didn't help, there are other tutorials. You can look stuff up on Google or other YouTube videos, but this should be everything that you need for the current assignments up to this point.